Three-decade-old cold case is getting new hope as police trying to figure out who took a woman's life and left her body in a Yemisi drainage ditch.
Woman who remained unidentified for nearly 30 years now has a name. 1995. The body of a woman was found in a ditch, wearing nothing but a pair of panties.
The sheriff says they may have been able to identify the victim sooner, but the mother of three was never reported missing.
She was 36 years old, a mother of three, a wife, but never reported missing.
The search for her killer now spanning multiple states.
A 36-year-old woman was found strangled and face down by a South Carolina Department of Highways employee in a drainage ditch on Cotton Hall Road, Yemisi. The woman, married and mother of three, had not been reported missing in the nearly 30 years since her death. This case garnered attention across South Carolina as efforts to identify the victim proved futile and the case remained unresolved. However, some investigators persisted in their mission to give the victim a name, uncover why she was abandoned in that manner, and find potential suspects.
The big question is now, and what we're looking for answers to, who murdered Maria? And we look to bring that person to justice.
On May 24, 1995, a South Carolina Department of Highways employee made a grim discovery: the lifeless body of a woman in a drainage ditch on Cotton Hall Road, Yemisi, South Carolina. Sheriff's deputies and investigators immediately began probing the case. An autopsy conducted at the Medical University of South Carolina confirmed it was a homicide. The victim, dressed only in underwear, couldn't be identified in the initial stages of the investigation. No personal effects were found at the scene to aid in identification. Bob Bramage, the lead investigator of the Unsolved case, described the scene with detachment. The woman had been discarded by the roadside as if she never existed. Her death was violent, intimate, and personal. As she had been strangled, it was evident that the murder occurred elsewhere, and her body was transported and dumped in that ditch. She had been dead for between 24 and 36 hours, perhaps longer. The condition in which the victim was found was bleak. She wore only underwear, and the only identifiable marks were a hysterectomy scar and a thyroid scar from previous surgeries. There were no jewelry, identification, or other clothing. Investigators disseminated information about her death to local media and utilized forensic technologies available at that time to try to identify her. Despite these efforts, the case stalled, and authorities decided not to pursue further. It wasn't until January 1999 when Sheriff P.J. Tanner decided to reinvigorate the investigation of murders and cold cases in the agency. He directed Sheriff's Office investigators to thoroughly examine all pending cases, including the murder of the unidentified woman found in Yemisi in 1995. A team of cold case investigators, along with a group of retired law enforcement professionals, reviewed reports and cataloged evidence from those old cases. Thanks to advances in forensic science, they submitted the evidence from the unidentified woman's case to the Forensic Laboratory of the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division for further analysis, including DNA testing. A DNA profile of the victim was developed, which was uploaded into the Combined DNA Index System, CODIS. Additionally, nationwide comparisons were made with missing women whose DNA profiles were in CODIS, but none matched the profile of the unidentified woman that had caused a stir across South Carolina. The media and the nearly 800 residents of Yemisi were urging the sheriff to quickly find the culprit or culprits of such an atrocity. But at this point, Tanner, the lead investigator, was at a crossroads. The victim's name, origin, and if there was a prime suspect, remained unknown. Whoever was responsible had worked meticulously to leave no trace of information at the crime scene. Meanwhile, NCIC teletypes arrived regarding missing women who had similarities to the victim. Hundreds of these teletypes, showing partially matching characteristics with the unidentified woman, were received and dismissed after comparison. Despite efforts, the woman's identity remained a mystery, and the investigation was losing steam, as was Sheriff P.J. Tanner and his team. In 2004, investigators believed they saw a glimmer of hope for the first time as they had found on the Doe Network website a list of missing persons, including Sybil Warren, whose physical characteristics matched those of the unidentified woman. The investigative team quickly contacted Sybil's mother, who provided a sample of her daughter's DNA for the investigation, hoping to at least be able to give her daughter a proper farewell as every human deserves. But unfortunately, the DNA analysts at SLED determined that Sybil was not the unidentified woman. The investigators decided they wouldn't sit idly by knowing they had come so close to giving the victim, found in South Carolina, an identity. In 2006, to begin utilizing everything at their disposal to move forward, Interpol was contacted and an international black notice was issued in an attempt to identify the woman. Despite these efforts, no leads about her identity were received. The following year, investigators sent the unidentified woman's DNA for a biogeographic analysis to determine her ethnic origin and better guide identification efforts. DNA print genomics reported that individuals with similar DNA markers self-identified as being from South Asia, Hispanic, and Middle Eastern origins. This new information, combined with the discovery of underwear from the Leonisa brand, primarily marketed in Latin American countries at the time, led investigators to conclude that the woman likely had Hispanic ancestry. That was encouraging information for the investigative team, who, despite their efforts, were struggling to make progress in the case. So much so that in 2010, with the assistance of the Sheriff's Office's Volunteer Cold Case Committee, investigators reached out to the Spanish international network, Univision, to request the broadcast of the unidentified woman's case. Univision agreed and produced a segment that aired in April of the following year. After the broadcast on Univision, investigators received information from a man who claimed that the unidentified woman resembled his sister, Josefina Nava. The man, a resident of New York, informed investigators that Josefina was originally from the Dominican Republic and had disappeared in Italy in the early 1990s. Finally, this could be a turning point in the case, and investigators began to believe and trust that they were slowly but surely getting closer to being able to at least give the victim a name. Investigators quickly contacted Josefina's family in the Dominican Republic by phone and obtained photographs of her. The similarities between Josefina and the unidentified woman were striking. Josefina's biological mother and son agreed to provide DNA samples for comparison with those of the unidentified woman. The FBI was contacted, and an agent was dispatched to the Dominican Republic to collect DNA samples. The analysis and comparison of DNA were conducted at the Forensic Services Laboratory of the Beaufort County Sheriff's Office. However, the DNA samples from Josefina's mother and son did not show any biological connection to the unidentified woman, and it is believed that Josefina remains missing to this day. The spirits were low. At this point, investigators believed their efforts were futile, and they were increasingly distant from even finding a suspect. With an unidentified victim and a potential perpetrator wandering around, things were not looking good, but law enforcement knew this killer needed to be caught. Over the years, several suspicious individuals were interviewed, including one as far as Ohio, accused of committing multiple murders. However, all these individuals were dismissed as possibly involved in the death of the unidentified woman. At this juncture, with the advancement of new technologies, it was time to leverage all possible tools. So much so that in 2020, faced with the increasing number of national success stories in identifying individuals through genealogical investigations, unresolved case investigators turned to the assistance of Parabon Nanolabs. This is a company headquartered in Reston, Virginia, which develops nanopharmaceuticals and provides DNA phenotyping services for law enforcement agencies. The DNA extract from the unidentified woman was sent to Parabon, where it was analyzed with their advanced technology and then compared to numerous ancestry databases. Through this company, a list of potential distant relatives of the unidentified woman were obtained. The Deputy Public Information Officer at that time was tasked with investigating the woman's family tree. Later, a volunteer member of the Unresolved Cases Committee joined to assist in the investigative task. This volunteer reached out to hundreds of potential relatives via email, many of whom expressed skepticism about the identity and purpose of the volunteer. Finally, after years of work and failing to secure conclusive evidence, in October 2022, the volunteer received a crucial lead regarding a possible biological son of the unidentified victim. After contacting the potential son via email, he agreed to upload his DNA profile to GED Match, an online service for comparing autosomal DNA data files from different testing companies. Within minutes, Parabon reported a parent-child match, thus confirming the identity of the unidentified victim after over 27 years. Now, after all these years, the research group knows that the nameless woman is Maria Telles-Gonzalez, who was 36 years old at the time of her death. Maria was a wife and mother of 3 children. Investigators have been in contact with Maria's family members, who reported last seeing her in 1995 at her home on Merrimack Drive, Kissimmee, Florida. To gather more information, the investigators traveled to Florida to interview Maria's relatives. During interviews and subsequent investigation, it was discovered that Maria had returned from a trip to Puerto Rico the day before her disappearance in May 1995. After her 3 children went to school, she left her home in Kissimmee and never returned. It was revealed that her husband was alone at home with her when the children left for school, and Maria departed without her vehicle. Furthermore, the suitcase she had brought from Puerto Rico had also disappeared, further deepening the mystery surrounding her disappearance and subsequent murder. Maria was never reported missing. According to the case investigator, Gonzalez's children believed their mother had abandoned the family, which is why no missing person report was filed. Furthermore, the family is very reserved when it comes to talking about the victim, to the point that they hired a lawyer so that the justice system can contact him directly and communicate only with him if they require more information. Maria's identification now afforded the justice system the opportunity to uncover the background to all of this. The question is, had she argued with her husband before she left the house? Did Maria intend to abandon her children? What occurred before her death? These were many difficult questions to answer until investigators identified 2 individuals closely linked to Maria, her close friend named Patricia, and a friend, or possible boyfriend, whose identity had yet to be established. Both were believed to also reside in the Kissimmee, Florida area. After locating and interviewing Patricia, the Beaufort County Sheriff's Office determined that the unidentified man, nicknamed Carlos, was a person of interest, but at this point, nobody knew his last name. Investigators have identified this potential witness, who is believed to have been a resident of the Orlando area at the time of Maria's disappearance. Associates of the main suspect provided old photographs, and thanks to these, officers were able to create age progression images using technology. Carlos is described as Hispanic, with an estimated height between 1.72 and 1.77 meters. People familiar with him reported that he is bilingual and speaks both Spanish and English. Amidst the mystery shrouding this case, the light of justice begins to shine. After 3 long decades, the identity of the victim has finally been brought to light, marking a crucial point in the quest for truth. But where does the main suspect hide? What secrets await revelation in this case? If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe to this channel for more similar content.